Howard County is now at this point one of the last counties in central Maryland to not have unionized library staff. And whether it's public sector, private sector employees, Starbucks, libraries, I think all workers have a right to a union, and, fair bargaining. And so, I've wanted to, knowing Kat, and she's a librarian, she's very passionate about her job. And, I know some other librarians, and they, are also passionate about their unions and their jobs. And so this was a topic that I had wanted to do a meeting on for a long time, not just about the union aspect, but also just even well before this $144 million lakefront library. It was already clear that, public libraries, which should be for the public interest and the public good, were being sort of co-opted by, developers and other for-profit private interests in a way that was very inappropriate and, did not, it diverted resources away from actually improving public library services. And so this was a problem that I had been noticing and wanted to do a panel or something about it for a long time. Then this lakefront library thing happened, as well as, before, another controversy with our library system. The chair of it, Tonya Akins, had gotten, in a little tiff because she closed the library early to let a private sorority host event there. And then the county audit got reported to the county auditor, and he started to investigate it. And the county council, or the county executive, and his allies on the county council tried to obstruct the investigation. And so, again, before either of these two incidents happened, I had already wanted to do a panel discussion or some sort of event around the abuse and politicization in a bad way, in a corrupt way, of our public library system for profit interests. And also, that I think that that's connected to the bad treatment and, low pay of library workers either, because when you have the public library system being co-opted by these private interests, it hurts the public and it hurts the workers. And so, again, I had already wanted to do a panel about those things before the auditor situation happened, before the 144 lakefront library proposal happened. But then both of those things happened, and I think it just really illustrates, how bad this problem is getting. And so, those are a lot of the topics we want to cover, is, a little bit about the $144 million lakefront library. But again, I have just gone through a lot of that, and a lot of our guests or a lot of our panelists are from out of county, might not be too familiar with that, and that's okay. But perhaps they have similar stories of similar boondoggles in their respective jurisdictions, but also, they are all union people. And so talking about the need for unionized library staff in Howard County, because again, Howard County is basically, one of the last counties in central Maryland to not have unionized library staff. I want them to talk about, some of their struggles that even the unionized library staff continue to go through, even with the union, and maybe why those exist. The increasing politicization and abuse of our public libraries for private and developer profit, and also recent attempts to censor LGBTQ plus friendly library content nationwide. Not only is that also a workers issue, but it is Pride Month, and this stuff, these attacks from fascists essentially are getting more and more frequent and more serious. And so I think it's fitting that we touch on that. And so with no further ado, and we will have a Q&A session for audience to ask questions as well at the end. And we also have I think we might have some union folks from the Harford County, or union or non-union folks from the Harford County library system, who I think will also at the end speak a little bit about legislative effort that they're working on to try to get either a union there or better conditions for union. So with no further ado, I thank you all for being patient, and I want to throw it off to the panelists to
Can I interrupt? Can I have you stop sharing your screen so people will be able to see the panelists?
Yes, good idea.
Thank you.
Yep. But yeah, if you want to start with your introduction, go for it.
Yes, I'm Kat Wee. I have been a librarian for about 23 years. I have a master's in library science. I work for a public library. I'm also a shop steward for UFCW Local 1994, also known as McGeo. And I'm gonna, I guess, ask the other people who are in here that are our panelists to go ahead and turn on their cameras and introduce themselves. I think I'll go ahead and start with Cassandra Harper.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Cassandra Harper. I am on the executive board of Local 1994 UFCW in Montgomery County, Maryland. I am a shop steward in Montgomery County Public Libraries, and I have worked as a librarian in public libraries since 2007.
Okay. Let's go to Anita.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Bass. I'm from the Baltimore County Public Library. I am the union president for Local Lodge 4538, and I've been with the library system in the circulation department for 11 years, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And we also have John Berry in here.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Berry. I'm an organizer and representative for McGeo 1994. And I've been working also representing PGC MLS and a lot of the workers there. So I was glad to hear that people at Howard County are interested in organizing. So.
And we also have Allie Bowerman.
Yes, hi. So I'm Allie, and I'm a children's resource specialist at the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore City. And I'm also part of the organizing committee for Pratt Workers United, which is the union for the Enoch Pratt Free Library. We're currently in the process of starting our bargaining period for our first contract. And I'm really excited to be with everyone today.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yes,
and I'm not sure if we have anyone else because there are a few people that were going to be coming in, but if I missed anyone, please. Okay,
yeah, I think
I have no. Okay.
Yeah, that was 5 people, right? Yeah, I think that's the panel. Yes, well, thank you all for agreeing to be a part of this and share your different perspectives, even if you are from neighboring counties. I'm sure that there's still a lot of overlap and a lot of similarities there. And so now that I have explained a little bit of the context of part of the reasons why we want to have this meeting, not just for the union stuff, but also just how our public libraries are being abused and co-opted by private interests in general, and how that could actually have a detrimental impact, not only on the public, but also on the workers. And so, I already talked quite a bit about this $144 million lakefront library proposal. And again, there was a lot of community opposition to it. But, CAT is very interesting because, community opposition is one thing from the general public, but also opposition from the staff or concerns from the staff, I think is very valid and very legitimate as well. And although Kat does not work in the Howard County public library system, Kat, did you have, what were your concerns or thoughts about the lakefront library proposal from like a librarian or staffer's perspective?
I would say from the staffer's perspective, it was quite a large library, bigger than some very large city libraries. And then the concern, and I did speak to some people at HCPL, was were they going to have enough staffing to cover that big of a library? That was a big concern. And then you're thinking about safety. So if you don't have enough staff and you have a really large building, you get safety concerns. So then are we going to have security there? Are we going to have cameras? And there's costs with all of that. If you have more staff, that's a huge cost right there. If you need to have security cameras, again, more cost. And then if you need security guards, how are you going to do that? Are they going to be part of HCPL staff? Are you going to contract out? There's always, more money, and the more stuff you have, and they talked about an auditorium, all this different equipment. That stuff also can break, get damaged, and then there are more costs with that. In the meantime, and it's supposed to be educational support, you realize they are not using any of that money for our overcrowded schools in Howard County. So that's a huge concern. Like, you have to take care of the kids at school before you have a huge, gigantic library with even more, educational offerings. So that's a huge concern. And it kind of goes into the concerns that even though we do have a union where I'm at, that libraries, large public libraries, have a lot of safety concerns all the time. And this is something people don't realize. And they often go, oh, I remember a library when I was 10 and it was so much fun and I felt so safe there. But in some of our larger urban areas now, that is really not the case. And I'll let someone else jump in on that one.
And I'm curious, from the out of county people, I'm curious, how much the word got out about this lakefront library proposal. Our panelists from out of county, I'm curious, did you all hear about this $144 million lakefront library proposal before it was voted on? And if so, what were your initial thoughts hearing about what was being proposed? And also, I'm curious, from the out of county panelists, this problem I'm describing of basically, our local government being co-opted by developers and other private interests, and then using that influence to infiltrate the library system and do these boondoggle projects. Have you all in the other counties seen examples of? I see Allie had her hands up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that so I think the city library system, I work in a branch library. So we kind of get the experience of seeing different libraries in different neighborhoods and seeing like the overall value of that neighborhood influence maybe who's interested in hopping on a development project. And I think especially with something like this, and I did actually hear about it, oddly enough, in we talked about it in one of my master's classes. But as a kind of an example of one of these sort of really frou-frou project that's kind of, it's strange to complain about it, because it's one of those things where it's like, how dare you? Of course we want a $144 million library. But when you get into it, it's like, is that something that we really need to spend? Or are these higher ups who are having these like adorable fantasies that can never really achieve the goals that the workers are actually like looking forward to building as library spaces? But I also think that libraries for a very long time have been heavily tied to real estate interests and just developers, I guess, in general, right? You want to make your neighborhood seem better. And because they do have that kind of PR element to it, I think it's easy for them to sneak things past you sometimes in these budgets. But yeah.
Yeah, no, great point. And yeah, it's definitely a hard PR sell, because the developers are clever. They do their for-profit projects by combining it with something that has very popular reception, like a library, so that when you come out critical of it and are suspicious, is this really going for the public, it makes it look like you're anti-library. And so it's a difficult position to be in. But yeah, Cassandra?
Hi, sorry, I had to unmute myself. A number of the library systems in this region have done either refresh or renovations on multiple branches throughout the whole region. If you look at District of Columbia, Montgomery County, Prince George's County as well. And oftentimes what you find is that there's a list of promises that the library administrations make to the staff and to the community of what you're going to get. And it's going to be so beautiful. It's going to be so great. And oftentimes, and I've worked in several of them, I've worked in different library systems throughout the region. I've worked in District of Columbia, and I also work for Montgomery County. So I'm talking on my experience in different jurisdictions. You open the doors aren't barely even ready to open for the public. Yeah. So they've come in, they've done this building, they've made this building and nothing in the building works. There are not even books in the building. You know, they promise this technology or this new system that's going to have this great technology. For example, those of you who may know, there's a library that opened with allegedly RFID book scanning. This thing cost millions of dollars to put in this particular locale. And it only worked for about a year, if I'm correct, maybe a year and a half, but it certainly doesn't work now. They put in a special way that you could, I'll explain what RFD is in a minute, but they put in a special conveyor belt in the building for the books as they're returned in massive loads. Would allegedly, a scanner would scan all these books. This is what RFID is, without a human actually being able to scan it manually. And it never worked properly. If you look at the MLK library in the District of Columbia, even and libraries have historically been used for this by developers. If you look at the MLK library, which was originally built in 1972, where I worked, that building was built with this state-of-the-art vacuum tube like you used to have at the drive-through tellers that would suck the new books in, and all it did was tore up all the books, and it never worked. And so these are things that when you have these big projects, they are something that need to be scrutinized by the community, because you have the directors of these library systems they really do court politicians and corporate interests to get this money. And in some cases, the relationship between those parties, particularly in my opinion, the library directors, needs to be very seriously questioned, their ethical role in it. And you'll see that from a development of an integrated library system, which is the system that you people use to search their books, to the actual building itself. So it is really a serious problem, and it's something that is across the entire region, and possibly, I can only speak for what I've noticed in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, but I would definitely say it's probably a national problem.
Yeah, no, sorry. I unmuted on the wrong device, my bad. But yeah, so I think that's a great point, Cassandra, of, the developers and the politicians can make all these fancy promises about, sure, it costs us much money, but it's going to be so great. It's going to be so futuristic. But, once the money is spent to the developer to build the project, and then they don't quite, deliver on everything that they said it was going to be, suddenly, oh, well, now it's an extra $20 million to repair the things that didn't quite work how they thought. And guess who's going to have to pay that $20 million? Us. Or yes, the taxpayer.
And that's the running game. Like, you'll notice they'll build these huge projects, and then they build an incomplete building, and then they keep coming back to the cash cow, for a lack of a better expression. Okay, you need that fixed. Okay, that's another 22 million. You need us to fix this. That's another 2 million there. So it's a game.
Yeah, and it's that's the another gripe about it that I didn't mention is the architect Heatherwick for the project has a long history of significant cost overruns, sometimes double the original thing. So 144 million is just what they said. If it got approved, it could have easily been nearly 300 million. Yeah, Anita. You might have to unmute yourself there.
Okay, I was saying it's funny that we're talking about this because our library system just got information on a new branch for the Essex area, and they've received $6 million for funding for a design study, just for the design study for a new Essex library. And they said that they're using it for, trying to see, 4.5 acres in the Essex area. And they're going to make sure it's embedded in a neighborhood with diverse residents, easy accessible to those who are on foot or take the bus, close to schools and other community assets, offer some green space, and located in a place where the library could best serve the community. So it's interesting that to find out that things happen and change as progress goes along. They didn't give us a year of when they were gonna, start digging in the dirt or anything. They just said a few years. So I'm not sure when that's gonna start, but this is all very interesting to hear.
Yeah, no, and again, to remind people, I had no idea. I didn't get to talk to the panelists from out of county in advance and say, hey, is there similar boondoggle developer projects with the libraries in other counties? I didn't know. I didn't have a chance to confirm, but I thought it's such a problem in Howard County. Chances are it's probably an issue in other counties too, and it sounds like it absolutely is. And even what Anita's saying of, the developer in the county saying, oh, this is the best spot. It's the most inclusive spot. It'll, here for equity issues. And it's like, maybe that's true. And if that's true, that's great. But maybe it's really just the most profitable place that they can put it. And so they're trying to say it's equitable and it's diverse and all these things to make it sound better. And again, maybe it really is, but because of the private profit motive in these projects, it causes the community to be very skeptical, and I would say rightfully so, especially when some of these developers and architects have a long track record of playing this game, as Cassandra called it, because once you commit and start the project and then they say it's another 20 million, what are you going to do? Just give up after you've already spent all that money? You kind of have to go through with it. And so thank you all for sharing those perspectives. And so another question I had sort of, and I think Cassandra put it great of, the library directors in each county is highly influential. Usually those are appointed by, I think in Howard County, it's actually they're appointed by the library board, but the library board is appointed by the county executive and the county council. And so if all the people making the appointments are co-opted by these special interests, then their appointees may also be co-opted by special interests. And in fact, here in Howard County...
Mind? I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you mind if I interrupt you? I'm sorry. In Montgomery County, it's even a little more dicey because we are a county government library system. We're not run by a county board. Our director only has one person between her and the county executive, and that's the chief accounting officer for the county. So she's a political person. Just wanted to share that one.
No, good to know. And, I happen to like the county executive in Montgomery County at the moment. And so maybe right now I would say that's not the worst thing in the world. But, 4 years from now, when maybe I don't like the county executive, then that might be, and maybe it's a problem now. And I'm just not.
No. It was really a serious problem under the previous director. And I think it gives the library directors in our county not so much an inappropriate relationship with the county executive, but one with business interest in the county and in the country.
Yeah,
because of the services that they have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, in my opinion, when we had the incident with our county library director, this is why she was never held accountable for doing something which you could say, so she closed it early to let a private group host an event. Is that the biggest deal in the world? Well, it was kind of an instance where maybe the cover up was worse than the actual, thing that they did in the first place, but that's why when, all these people, these different entities are all sort of co-opted to some degree by special interests, that's why they cover for each other and they watch each other's backs. Ahmed, thank you for hopping on. I see you got your hand up. Right now, we're just talking with the panelists, and we are, after we ask a couple more questions, then we're going to throw it to the audience to ask questions. But you will have a chance to ask your question in a second, Ahmed. But a thing,
and I was going to jump in on that particular incident that was particularly heinous with the Howard County CEO, was they sent staff home early so that the party could take place, meaning they were not paid for that time. And I have to say, in the county where I work, because we have a union, that could not take place. They have to be paid. They should not be taking their own leave. And everything has to be open to the public. You can't have an event at our library our county executive would be quite disturbed by that if we had a private event for only certain people and we told employees to go ahead and take leave. That absolutely 100% couldn't happen without there being a lot of drama, let's put it that way, and the director would be held accountable. So yeah.
And they tried to claim that, you know, closing it down early for the private event didn't cost the public anything. But if they told workers that they could go home and take sick leave that they otherwise would not have taken, then, you know, it kind of did, you know, cost the public some money. But nonetheless, it was an abuse, in my opinion. And, you know, it should have been allowed to be investigated, and it was not. But, you know, on that note of how these things are able to sort of get a rubber stamp and get passed, you know, whether it's, you know, holding the event for allied group or, you know, these library expansion renovations, you know, that are really just sort of clever gifts for developer buddies. You know, one of the ways that they have to do it is, one, have the, you know, county council and county executive in their pocket, and also have the, you know, the library board director or whatever in their pocket. But then also it's getting the library board themselves on board. And in Howard County, again, the library board is appointed by the county council and the county executive. And we absolutely do have people with massive conflicts of interest on our library board. You know, the chair of the library board is a sitting board of education member, Antonio Watts, who has taken Howard Hughes Corporation money and has been very developer friendly on their time on the Board of Education. Another library board member, Sabina Taj, former Board of Education member, also took Howard Hughes money, also very close ally to the county executive and very developer friendly. And then the vice chair, Philip Dodge, is, you know, one very entrenched in the Downtown Columbia Partnership for the future development of downtown, which Howard Hughes Corporation has a huge stake in. And so, you know, that is an essential part of how these things that, in my opinion, are not only against the interests of the public, but also against the interests of the workers. That's how these things are able to get passed, is you have these rubber stamps on the board. And so I'm curious, you know, we've talked about the library director in other counties, but, you know, people in other counties, you know, do you all also have similar conflicts of interest that you're aware of on your respective county library boards, if you're comfortable sharing?
I almost said it there. I'm trying to be careful not to say in my particular county, but in my library system, I think the biggest conflict of interest, and Kathleen can comment on this if she wants to, may be between our assistant director, and I'm going to say it publicly here, and a contract for an integrated library system that it seems that there was a lot of very unethical things done, like they went to a conference, they stayed in the same hotel. They stayed in a hotel room paid for these people. They partied. I hate to say this. Were photographed by library employees at this very conference, having drinks in the hotel bar. And they, what was it they had us do, Kathleen? They gave us like gifts from the company. Tried to give it to county employees, but they weren't that expensive. But they were like, wear this T-shirt on, you know, that we got this new ILS system that said COHA. And I was like, I'm not wearing that. I'm not advertising the light. We don't do that for any other service we have. Why would I wear that for this?
Oh.
And so it looked like, I don't know, but and I don't like to cast aspersions like that out in the public, but it looked questionable. It was very questionable.
Yeah.
It was very questionable. And even they tried to get us to join this activity where you had to pay. And that was really odd. And the system worked pretty poorly, and they actually had to hire a person to handle the problems with this so-called system that they decided to buy, an entire human being with a salary dedicated to her to deal with the issues with this new system. So we wonder, like, was it really a good purchase in the long run? And the other thing that an assistant director did in the system we work in is buy a lot of self-checkout machines. And then kind of a forced thing where forcing us to have numbers and making us force customers to use them. And customers honestly were upset because they like talking to the checkout people, you know, who work in circulation. They didn't want to use them, but we were like being forced and coerced and basically publicly shamed if our branch didn't have the numbers. It was quite sad.
Well, you actually, this is where unions kind of help, because you could get written up if you didn't show customers to do this. Like staff were counseled about this. Staff, I'm sorry, I think my mute was weird. Staff in our library system were counseled about not showing customer how to use a specific self-checkout machine, and you, without the union, you could have been written up about it, because they were like forcing staff. You need to show them how to use the self-checkout. You need to show them how to use the self-checkout. Something's wrong with you if you're not showing them how to use the self-checkout.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, because again, I'm still relatively new to this issue, and a lot of stuff at the local level does involve developers, and that's how some of the examples that we've seen of, you know, private profit, you know, getting their finger in the pie on the public libraries. But I didn't even think of it, but that's like another huge opportunity for sort of corrupt favors, if you want to call it that, of these different software companies who want to sell these, you know, different technological software products. And if you know the right person in the county, then they'll give you that contract that may or may not work. And also, it sounds like they're like forcing you all to like show the library patrons how to do this automation stuff that like will eventually maybe put you all out of jobs, which seems, you know, kind of gross in its own way. Yeah. So
yes, literally it would put people in circulation, part of their job, if they could get everyone to always check out like you do in the grocery store. If you notice, how many actual grocery store cashiers do you have now? Not as many as you used to. And yes, it would take away union represented jobs. So a lot of us weren't that happy with the self-checkout machines. And also they broke a lot and often don't work properly.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you all for sharing that. And I did have a question about library foundations and how they all play into that. And maybe we'll get back to that question if we have some time. But there's some other important questions here that I don't want us to miss that I, you know, want to ask. And so I want to ask to all the panelists, you know, explaining almost to a skeptical person, like why should library workers be unionized? You know, somebody might say, well, you know, it makes sense in the private industry, you know, you have the private companies just caring about profit. And so that means paying workers less. And so that's why workers need a union. But libraries, these are public entities. These are not for profit. So why, despite that, do you all think, you know, all library workers should have a union? Anita, so you got your hand up. Oh, you might have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
All right. Yes, I know people ask that all the time, but it doesn't really matter where you're working. People want to feel like they are important. They want to have a seat at the table. They want to have a say. We started during the pandemic, was when we really started pushing on it. And at that time, there was stuff that was coming out in emails. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know if we were getting paid for some of that time that we were closed. And I would hope that things would be a little bit different if we had a union right at that time. But as we were organizing, it helped us to organize and focus. We learned that we could negotiate our benefits and get job protections, get better health benefits for our part-timers. It's something that library workers need. They do need a seat at the table. They do need to be able to say, look, this is something that we don't like. They change things on us all the time. They just, you know, want to throw stuff out there. To have a union for our library in Baltimore County Public Library with the IM is something that is golden to us. Yes, it's a challenge, but yes, we are making it through. We are under our second contract and we are proud of that. thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you all, Anita, and you all just unionized last year, right?
We've been together. 2020 was when we were working on the legislation, and my union organizer is on here, Bridget Fitzgerald, and I know she can talk a whole lot about it. But we organized then, and we had to, because we are a public library, we had to have 2 bills pass, and we had to create a law. So once we got that through, we organized, got our first contract last year, and then we had the second contract that we worked on this year.
Okay.
So Bridget just put something in the chat.
Most library directors are changing their title to CEO.
Yes.
They may not be for-profit private sector employees, but they're beginning to operate them. Yeah, you're right about that's a very good point, Bridget.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Allie, I know you also in Pratt, they recently just became a union too, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's weird because it feels at once not recent and recent. I guess to answer the initial question you brought up of like, okay, why libraries? Like, why they specifically need to organize? And I think it's really kind of cool that we started out talking about buildings and building renovations, because I think that was one of the things that at least brought me onto this project. I know that for us organizing, we were in a long gestational period, even before I kind of joined. But one of the major motivating things was a large renovation project, and just feeling really helpless that everything about our jobs was being affected, and they never asked us. I mean, they did, but you know how they do. They ask you just to pat themselves on the back for having asked. And, when we talk about things like, okay, we get all of these self-checkouts and then they break, like the people that have the most knowledge about this, who are able to make the most cost-effective and the best and smartest decisions about how to run their libraries, are librarians and other library staff, including ones who don't do library work, but instead just like they are part of the library, people who maintain our buildings, people who run security, kind of everyone. And that's who I want to be making the decisions about the library, and how it works, as the patrons and the people that work there really like work with the public and in those buildings, and because we're the ones who know how to make the best decisions and how to make this work best for everyone. We just need the power to do that, and that's something that unions have been able to kind of bring us, and that is why we're really excited about contract negotiations.
Absolutely, and congrats and thank you both in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. Yeah, John?
Yeah, first of all, congratulations on the contract, and good luck with that. We just finished one at PGC MLS, and I am a representative for UFCW, but I would have wished that some of the other stewards could be there tonight, but actually they're going out and trying to lobby the council now that we passed the contract, and trying to make sure that they understand that it is in their political self-interest to actually support this very valuable library staff. So our point of view is sometimes when, we understand how corrupt things can get, but we then appeal to people's self-interest and remind people over and over again that this is a highly trained, highly skilled library staff, that if you don't, if you don't keep giving them a reason to stay, they're going to be leaving. Actually, the person who was going to be our CEO just got stolen away by the Library of Congress. So these things happen over and over again, and we just have to remind them, and the members of our library. We have been a union for a PGC in Prince George's County for well over a dozen years, but they never slow down. They never stop reminding people that they're there, and they never stop reminding people that, you know, you can't have a library. I mean, you may have some great equipment that you want to show off, but without a staff, you're going to be falling apart. So we want to make sure that people understand that connection. We keep doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. And yeah, Cassandra?
Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute myself. I think it's important for libraries to have unions because with my experience as a public librarian, my experience has been that the administrations are run in a very top-down hierarchical manner, and the directives are come out as directives, very serious directives to be followed without no input is ever asked from the rank and file staff. I don't know about other libraries, and this has been my experience in too. They generally do not appreciate comment and inquiry. It's looked as bad employee if you question. So a lot of people don't speak up. And so the only organization in which library workers have an opportunity to speak up is through their union and their elected stewards or their stewards and their locals. And also increasingly, you know, you have these different, here in Montgomery County, I'm going to shift my thought here for a minute. There is also in some parts of the United States a movement to contract public libraries. There is a company right out here in Germantown called LLSI, which is my former director from DC Public Libraries, who got fired for her abusive treatment. And I will say that because that was public knowledge. She got fired from her abusive treatment from DC Public Library of the general staff at large, management and rank and file union staff, is now the president of that. So the CEO over at LSSI. And that's a small company, but it has contracts in places like Tennessee and Arkansas, Kentucky, maybe some parts out in the West, where these libraries are now run by contractors, and they're not paid by they're not paid as government employees or people working under a library board. So that has some serious implications for access to information when you have libraries run by companies that are actually contracted out public library systems. And I'm going to mute myself because my dog started barking.
Yeah, no worries. Definitely a very interesting, point there. And especially, it rings back to what you said earlier about, just like even just getting your foot in the library world through like one county can open doors in the business world all across the country. And it sounds like that sort of happened there. And then also, you're saying all these major decisions that affect the lives of the library workers are made without any serious input from the library workers. And, one example of that with this lakefront library proposal, I left out a big part. Not only, do they want to build the $144 million library, but part of the proposal is to tear down an existing library in a different location. And, so this doesn't even, net increase the amount of libraries we had. But, my question, my thought was, okay, so if they're going to tear down the existing library and then build a new library, what if there's like a 3-month gap between when the existing library is torn down and when the new library is put up? What's going to happen with all those workers at the central library that's going to get torn down for those 3 months? Do they get paid leave? Are they just going to be shuffled to a different library in the county in the meantime? And so we had a town hall about this at that central library that's supposed to be torn down. And I asked the workers, like, what's the plan here? This seems like it could affect your guys' lives, like in a really great way. Like what's the plan for you guys? They just didn't know. They seem like they're completely in the dark. They don't know about what's going to happen with their job, what's going to happen with this project. And to me, I would hate to be in that position. I would feel very stressful being in that position. So I guess one more question I'll ask before, we turn it to the audience is, definitely interested to hear from, Allie and Anita on this, though anyone can speak up. But, let's say a Howard County librarian or Howard County library staff is listening to this panel right now, and they want to know, what do I do to try to unionize my library? What would be your advice on, steps to take to make that happen? And also, what are some of the things that some of the resistance that they should expect from administration or other outside forces, obstacles they may have to overcome in that process?
I can say something. So what, is there anyone here on this in this meeting that is from the Howard County Library? There isn't anyone. So I guess my suggestion is they need to reach out to a union, whatever union they want to get information from and to get started with, to help with organizing. And yes, there's going to be pushback from your, administration. But once you get involved with the union and you start working on what your rights are, that should help you to get organized, because there's a process that you have to do. Allie?
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't be surprised if there is like a group of people that have either independently thought like, I'd like to start a union, or already maybe have started to have those conversations out loud. But the first step to having a union is always to talk to your coworkers about your working conditions. We have big milestones that you need to meet along the way in terms of like concrete things you need to do to get the union off the ground, getting it recognized, officially voted in, all of that sort of thing. But then I think it's really important not to lose sight of that connection with your coworkers as the thing that really drives the whole union forward, because that's how you remember why it is that you set out to do it in the first place, is just like making sure to ground yourself in the issues that your coworkers are experiencing, so that you can kind of, use that to build a future contract.
Thank you. Yeah, John, I saw you had your hand up as well.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, yeah, we have been reaching out in the past to Howard Community Library, and we are definitely looking for more interest. I guess there aren't any, but there isn't anybody from Howard Community Library here.
Yeah, maybe not on this call, but we do record this, and we'll send it out so people, even if they're not watching live, may see it. Or there may be a worker on this call who doesn't feel comfortable revealing that because they're afraid of, maybe they'll lose their job or something if they speak out. But I hope there did seem to be at least a decent amount of, the administration's really trying to shove the Lakefront Library thing down their throat and kind of force them to accept it and like have these propaganda displays. Because we did go and Kat and I handed out flyers promoting this panel to the different library things. And, there were people who came to our town halls that worked at the libraries. And so I do like to think that there is sort of silent approval, at least with some contingency of the local library staff here. But again, I can only imagine it's probably a scary thing, because you might be taking a risk to your job by like speaking out publicly for something like that.
For sure, they would be, and Bridget just put in one of the biggest reasons, and I knew about that law, and it puts them at great risk. And also, I've heard that the CEO in the past has threatened that they would have to get rid of half the staff, lay them off, if they had a union, because that would cost them so much more. And so you have a lot of people are quite scared. Even though I had some very good conversations with people, a lot of them did express the fact that decisions are made from the top and they're just told and they're not asked. And as far as Joe was saying, they'll have that new library open, they apparently have not informed staff of that, because staff told me they weren't sure what was going to happen. And they also said, we hope they won't close Central Branch before the opening of that other library, but they don't know. And if someone's promised that, let's see what happens, but oftentimes promises get broken. So I wouldn't be so sure.
Yeah. Anita, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to mention what Bridget mentioned about the Howard County law that they have. And it's a shame what you just said about them losing their jobs and they don't know where they're going to go. Gosh, yeah. If anyone is on here, talk to your, like Allie said, talk to your coworkers and get that conversation going again. Because you all do need to have a voice.
And it is scary. I do just want to like remind people that it's always going to be scary. There's always going to be, you really have to inoculate yourself and your coworkers against those types of threats and fears, even if they're not real, even if they're just threats. That's a very real thing. And so it's going to be important that people rely on their coworkers to kind of create a network of support around that. It's always going to be hard, but I don't think that means it's not doable. Yeah. So clearly, like, we're all here. So
yeah. Moral of the story I'm hearing is there will probably be some pushback and some resistance, but it's absolutely, hopefully worth the fight, but you got to do it in a careful way and, in a way that, minimizes risk, even if it can't be eliminated. And so, it sounds like there's a lot of allies from other unions, library unions, who have done this in the past and in the very recent history as well. And so I encourage people to reach out to, John, Allie, Anita, any of the Kat or Cassandra, and I'm sure they can get you on the right path there. Thank you so much to all of the panelists. Great discussion. Again, I didn't even know exactly what everybody has, been exposed to in the other counties, but, it sounds like things aren't too different here in Howard County. And so thank you to the panelists. And before we close out the meeting, want to hand it over to our friend Megan, works for the libraries in Harford County, about some important legislative efforts that they've been working on.
Thanks, Jake. Yes, I am Megan Baker. I have been a Harford County Public Library employee for 18 years now. And we, for the past 2 legislative sessions, have been trying to get a bill passed that would enable us to explore unionizing here in Harford County. The first session, which would have been 2022, we had a Harford County bill that was basically killed by our own delegation, because we are a predominantly Republican area. And so, yeah, that was quite disappointing. We tried to change our direction midstream to do it statewide, but that was not possible during that session. So this past 2023 session, that's what we did. We presented legislation that was would apply to any unorganized counties, and would also repeal what is currently the law in Howard County. We were a lot more successful than last year. And we really thought that we, going into the middle of the session, that we were going to get it passed through. We were able to get our House bill passed through the House, and then it was moved over to the Senate, where it effectively died in committee and was never brought to a vote. So the thought being is that our legislation probably got traded off for to get some other legislation passed. So the group that I have here in Harford County, because we've been doing it for so long, it's dwindled quite a bit. A lot of people have left. Morgan, who was on the call earlier, we joke around that it's always the Morgan and Megan show, that we are the resident troublemakers here in Harford County. So if you have a complaint you bring it to one of us and we speak up for you. But we definitely want to take it to the next level, which would involve unionizing. So we are planning to do another bill this coming session. We have had pushback from a number of directors under the guise of MAPLA, which they introduced their own legislation or proposed legislation, which was, it was modeled after the Howard County bill, because that's the one that they all like. Needless to say, it's the only one on record that you have the ability to unionize, but they haven't. So that kind of says a lot right there. That's the one that all of our directors and CEOs are a fan of. And, but we have been very adamant about the fact that, you know what, that this is about the workers. It's not about the administrators. It's not about the boards. This is legislation that is based on workers' rights. And really, when it comes down to it, it's not even whether you're pro-union or anti-union. It's a basic civil, like it's a rights issue. If we were in the private sector, we would be able to unionize. But because of libraries being created by the Maryland legislature, the different county charters, we have to get a law passed in order to have this right. And that's something that I think a lot of people, whenever we talk to people about our legislation, they're always shocked and surprised that this isn't a right that we already have. So we're really hoping to get a lot more support this year. I know it's been challenging to get people from Harford County to come out just because it's exhausting and it takes so much out of your regular life. Like I know Morgan and I kind of tag team this past session where she would go and testify at the Senate, and then I would go to the House, and we were going to Annapolis kind of in not in unison because it was difficult to kind of plan that. But yeah, we definitely still want to work through this process. It's just a matter of kind of regrouping and kind of building up that support. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing about that effort. So it sounds like that would affect not just Harford County, but all the counties, including Howard County. So
yes. The only ones that it wouldn't repeal any county. So any counties that are already organized, they would not be affected. The only way that they would be affected would be if they were to decertify, and then our law would take over their law. So
yeah, and I see Ann Bracken saying in the chat, there seems like they're having a similar fight at the state level with tenured and adjunct professors. And yeah, that's a thing. I applied to be a union organizer for community colleges, didn't get the job, but just going through the application process, I learned that when they say everybody has a right to unionize, that actually only applies for private sector jobs. For public sector, there needs to be enabling legislation giving you that right. And so that was something I didn't know about until, relatively recently. Well, thank you, Megan, for sharing that, because again, it does affect, definitely Howard County. And so it should be something on our radar. And who's the bill sponsors, by the way?
Last year it was sponsored by Delegate Steve Johnson from Harford County. We did have a co-sponsor in the House, but on the Senate side, we had, I believe it was 7 co-sponsors in the Senate, and we still couldn't get it through. So, yeah. No,
that's like the big fraction of the Senate right there.
And we had bipartisan support as well. So
Yeah, no, well, that's let's hope that we can get it. Yeah, maybe for our state senator Guy Gazzoni. I think from what I understand, he was an ally on the community college unionization maybe, and so I'm quite critical of him, but on the if he's good on these issues, then why not work with him. And so thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Megan. Thank you everybody who came in the audience. I'm sorry it was a long meeting.
Yes, sorry it went a little long, and we had a little offshoot of a little bit of an argument about Starbucks, but unions, we believe in them, and ORHoCo definitely supports your striving for legislation, and we will stay in touch with you all.
Yes, and so we'll send out the recording of this, and we'll send out the slideshow. But thank you all. Hope people can join us at our next monthly meeting, July 3rd, and stay tuned for any other activities and events we do before then. But thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, and good night. And I'm going to just stop the recording and end the meeting. And I'm going to just stop the recording and end the meeting.